The conference hall fell silent. Not the comfortable silence of contemplation, but the suffocating quiet that precedes catastrophe. Ambassador Thex 7 stared at the empty human delegation seats, his four eyes blinking in disbelief. The polished metallic chairs seemed to mock him with their vacancy. "They actually left," whispered Council Member Vel2, her serpentine form coiling nervously around her hover chair. "The humans actually walked out." The Thex 7 would have laughed if his species possessed the ability. The irony was delicious. Really, here they were, the Galactic Council, masters of 17 star systems, arbiters of interspecies law for over 3 millennia, and they had been abandoned by a species that barely crawled out of their gravity well 2 centuries ago. The massive holographic display still showed the terms they had so graciously offered Terra. Restriction of human expansion to 12 systems. Mandatory genetic screening for all human offspring. Complete surrender of their military arsenal, and, of course, the crown jewel of their benevolence, allowing humanity to maintain cultural autonomy within designated reservations. Generous terms, Thex 7 had called them just 3 hours ago. Now, staring at those empty seats, the word tasted like plasma residue in his mouth. Supreme Chancellor Quoth 9 rose from his crystalline throne, his towering frame casting shadows across the assembly. His voice, when it came, carried the weight of absolute authority. "Recall the human delegation. Immediately." "Sir," Communications Officer Zorn 4 stammered, her tentacles dancing frantically over the control panels. "They are not responding to our hails." "Then increase transmission power." "Sir, I have tried every frequency, every protocol." The human ship, UES Defiance, has gone completely dark. "They have activated some kind of jamming field we cannot penetrate." The Chancellor's compound eyes narrowed to slits. 3 hours. That was all it had taken for humanity to transform from an irritating but manageable pest into something that made his chitinous shell crawl with unease. General Mox 3 slammed his armored fist against the tactical display. "This is unacceptable. They dare insult the Council. They dare reject our mercy." Karvax 7 found himself studying the human departure footage again. The way their leader, Admiral Kane, had stood slowly, deliberately, the calm in his blue eyes as he surveyed the council chamber, the slight smile that played at the corners of his mouth as he spoke those final words. "We came here believing in peace. We leave understanding war." Simple words. 13 words that somehow managed to convey more menace than all of General Mox 3's bombastic threats combined. Humans, Thex 7 reflected, had a peculiar talent for understatement. "What are our intelligence reports on human military capability?" Chancellor Quath 9 demanded. General Mox 3 straightened, his confidence returning. "Limited, sir. Their fleet consists of approximately 200 vessels, primitive fusion drives, basic energy weapons, crude missile systems. Their largest ship masses barely 50,000 tons. In comparison, our battle cruisers mass over 3 million tons each. Crew complements? Insignificant. Each human vessel carries between 50 and 300 crew members. Their entire space navy totals less than 40,000 personnel. We have individual fleets, larger than their entire military." Chancellor Quoth 9 nodded approvingly. "And their ground forces, even more primitive. Chemical propellant weapons, basic armor systems, no energy shields. Their elite forces, the ones they call Marines, number fewer than 200,000 across their entire species. They are, in military terms, utterly negligible." The Chancellor's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. "Then we shall demonstrate the consequences of defying the Council. General, prepare the 3rd Imperial Fleet for deployment." "Sir?" General Mox 3 hesitated. "The 3rd Fleet. Sir, that is a force of 800 vessels. Perhaps a smaller task force would suffice for such a minor rebellion." "No." The Chancellor's voice carried finality. "We will make an example of humanity. Other species must understand what happens to those who reject Council authority." The Thex 7 watched the proceedings with growing unease. Something about the human departure troubled him, though he could not identify exactly what. Perhaps it was Admiral Kane's composure. Most species, when faced with Council displeasure, showed fear, anger, desperation. Kane had shown none of these emotions. He had shown anticipation. The communication console chirped urgently. Officer Zorn 4's tentacles flew over the controls. "Sir, we are receiving multiple priority transmissions from border stations." "From which sectors?" "All of them, sir. Every border station in human space is reporting the same phenomenon." A cold sensation crept up the Tsefseman's spine. "What phenomenon?" "Sir, the humans are fortifying. Every human colony, every mining station, every orbital platform is going to maximum defensive posture. They are evacuating civilians from border worlds and establishing what appears to be a defense perimeter." General Mox 3 snorted derisively. "Defense perimeter? With what?" "Harsh language and pointed sticks." But Thax 7 was no longer listening. He was remembering something Admiral Kane had said during the negotiations, a casual comment that everyone had dismissed as human bravado. "You should understand something about my species, honored Chancellor. We are very good at two things: learning and killing. Sometimes we do both simultaneously." "Sir," Officer Zorn 4 continued, her voice rising with concern, "there is something else. Our deep space monitoring stations are detecting massive energy signatures from the Sol system." "What kind of energy signatures?" "Unknown, sir. The readings are unlike anything in our databases." Chancellor Corp 9 waved dismissively. "Irrelevant. Whatever primitive weapons they are preparing will be inadequate against Council might." General Mox 3, "I want the Third Fleet deployed within 6 rotations. We will show humanity the price of defiance." "Yes, sir? And our objectives?" "Complete subjugation. Occupy all human worlds. Dismantle their military infrastructure. Relocate their population to the designated reservation zones." The Chancellor paused, his compound eyes glittering with cold satisfaction. "And bring me Admiral Kane's head." As the Council chamber erupted in approving clicks and hisses, X7 found himself staring once again at the empty human seats. Something was wrong. Terribly, fundamentally wrong. Humans did not behave like other species. They did not follow predictable patterns. They did not surrender. Over his long career as a Council diplomat, Vex 7 had overseen the integration of dozens of species into the galactic community. The process was always the same: initial contact, demonstration of Council superiority, negotiation from a position of strength, and finally acceptance of Council terms. Some species required military persuasion, but they all eventually submitted. Humans, however, had spent 3 days in negotiations without once asking about the consequences of refusal. They had questioned Council authority, challenged Council precedents, and demanded modifications to terms that were non-negotiable. When finally presented with the ultimatum, they had not begged for mercy or time to consider. They had simply left. "Sir," Officer Zorn 4 interrupted his thoughts. "We are receiving a transmission from human space." The chamber fell silent. Chancellor Quetha 9 leaned forward. "Display it." The holographic projection shimmered, revealing the bridge of what appeared to be a human warship. Admiral Kane stood at its center, his uniform crisp, his bearing relaxed. Behind him, Thex 7 could see human crew members working with calm efficiency at their stations. "Greetings, Galactic Council," Kane began, his voice carrying clearly through the transmission. "I trust you have had time to consider our departure from your generous peace negotiations." General Mox 3 stepped forward aggressively. "Human, you will return immediately and accept Council terms, or face the consequences of your rebellion." Kane smiled, and Thax 7 felt his blood chill. It was not a pleasant expression. "General, I appreciate your directness. Allow me to be equally direct in response." The Admiral walked closer to the transmission pickup, his blue eyes seeming to stare directly through the hologram at each Council member individually. "You offered us slavery disguised as protection. You demanded surrender, masked as negotiation. You threatened annihilation presented as mercy. We offered you survival." Chancellor Queth 9 interjected. "No," Kane replied softly, "you offered us existence. There is a difference. A significant difference." The human admiral turned slightly, gesturing to someone off-screen. "You see, honored Chancellor, You made a critical error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed we were like other species you have encountered. You assumed we would choose survival over freedom. And you choose death over subjugation. General Mox III sneered. How remarkably stupid. Kane's smile widened, and Tech 7 realized with growing horror that the human was enjoying this conversation. Oh, General? You misunderstand completely. We are not choosing death. We are offering it. The transmission shifted, showing a tactical display that made Tech 7's heart skip several beats. The screen showed not human space, but the outer rim of Council territory. Red markers indicated the positions of Council fleets, supply depots, communication relays, and military installations. All of them were targeted. You see, Kane continued conversationally, while you were preparing your generous terms for our subjugation, we were preparing for the inevitable rejection of those terms. Did you really think we came to these negotiations hoping for peaceful resolution? Did you actually believe we expected you to treat us as equals? Chancellor Kutath-san's voice carried a note of uncertainty for the first time. What are you saying, human? I am saying, honored Chancellor, that you were not negotiating with diplomats. You were negotiating with bait. The tactical display updated, showing new information that made Tech 7's vision blur. Human vessels, hundreds of them were positioned throughout Council space. Not the primitive ships in their intelligence reports, but sleek predatory craft that his sensors had somehow failed to detect. While your intelligence services were counting our official fleet, you somehow failed to notice that we have been building a second navy for the past 50 years. A navy specifically designed for one purpose, killing Council forces. General Mox III sputtered in outrage. Impossible, our sensors would have detected construction on such a scale. Your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect, Kane replied. You see, General, we learned something important about your species during first contact. You are arrogant. You assume technological superiority grants you intellectual superiority. You scan for what you expect to find, not what might actually be there. The Admiral gestured again, and the display showed footage of human shipyards. Not the orbital facilities the Council had catalogued, but massive underground construction sites on dozens of worlds. Ships emerging from concealed asteroid bases, weapons platforms rising from seemingly uninhabited moons. For 50 years we have been preparing for this moment. For 50 years we have been studying your tactics, your technology, your weaknesses. For 50 years we have been asking ourselves a single question: how do we kill something bigger than us? The answer, when it came, was delivered with the casual tone one might use to comment on weather. We found several interesting solutions. The Tech 7 watched in fascination and growing terror as the tactical display showed human forces moving into attack positions around Council installations. These were not the desperate defensive preparations they had been told about. This was a coordinated offensive deployment on a scale that defied comprehension. You have 12 hours to begin evacuating your military personnel from the installations we have marked, Kane continued. After that time, we will demonstrate why your peace terms were inadequate. You dare threaten the Council? Chancellor Quarth-9 roared. Sir, with respect, we passed threatening about 3 hours ago. We are now at promising. Kane's expression hardened. You wanted to put humanity in cages. You wanted to control our breeding, limit our expansion, govern our choices. You offered us the privilege of existing under your authority. The Admiral stepped closer to the pickup, and his next words were delivered with quiet intensity. We decline your offer. Instead, we extend one of our own. Withdraw all Council forces to your core systems. Cease all expansion into the Outer Rim territories. Recognize human sovereignty over our claimed space. Do this, and we will allow your civilization to continue existing. The chamber erupted in outraged clicks and hisses, but Kane continued speaking over the noise. Refuse our terms, and we will demonstrate why peaceful coexistence was in your best interests. You see, honored Council members, you made one critical error in your intelligence gathering. You counted our ships, catalogued our weapons, assessed our numbers, but you never asked the important question. Chancellor Quarth-9 demanded silence from his assembly. What question, human? Kane's smile returned, cold and predatory. You never asked why a species barely 2 centuries into spaceflight would dare to defy a galactic empire. You never wondered what we might know that you do not. The transmission began to fade, but Kane's final words carried clearly through the static. 12 hours, Chancellor. Use them wisely. The hologram disappeared, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. The Thex Evans stared at the empty space where Kane's image had been, his mind racing through implications and possibilities. Around him, council members buzzed with confused chatter, but their words seemed distant and meaningless. Chancellor Quathnine rose slowly, his composure shaken but his authority intact. General Mox 3, accelerate fleet deployment. I want the 3rd fleet in human space within 3 rotations. Sir, the general hesitated. Perhaps we should consider the human claims. If they have forces we were unaware of. Propaganda, the Chancellor snapped. Elaborate deception designed to make us hesitate. Deploy the fleet. Show them the consequences of threatening the Council. But as orders flew around the chamber and military preparations began, Thex 7 remained fixed on a single terrifying realization. Admiral Kane had not been bluffing. The humans were no longer interested in peace because they had already decided on war. Not defensive war, not reluctant war, but the kind of war that his species had nearly forgotten existed. Total war. The kind of war where victory mattered more than survival, where principle mattered more than profit, where the only acceptable outcome was the complete destruction of one's enemies. For the first time in his long diplomatic career, Ambassador Thex 7 found himself wondering if the Galactic Council had finally encountered a species they could not conquer. The humans, it seemed, were about to provide an answer to that question, and the Thex 7 suspected he was not going to like what they had to say. 6 hours had passed since Admiral Kane's ultimatum. 6 hours of frantic military preparation, intelligence reassessment, and growing dread in the hearts of every council member who possessed enough tactical awareness to understand what they were facing. Ambassador Thex 7 stood in the observation deck of the Council flagship, watching the 3rd Imperial Fleet form up for departure. 800 vessels, the pride of galactic civilization, bristling with weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been breached in 3 millennia of warfare. It should have been an inspiring sight. Instead, it filled him with the kind of cold certainty that preceded disaster. Still having doubts, Ambassador? General Mox 3 approached from behind, his heavy footsteps echoing off the reinforced deck plates. Your lack of faith in Council superiority is becoming tiresome. My lack of faith, Thex 7 replied without turning around, is based on 50 years of diplomatic experience. Something you might consider valuable if your ego permitted rational thought. The general's mandibles clicked angrily. Careful, diplomat. Military authority supersedes diplomatic protocol in wartime. Wartime. Thex 7 tasted the word, finding it bitter. Is that what we are calling this? A war against a species we still know nothing about. We know enough. Primitive technology, limited numbers, no significant industrial capacity. Mox 3 gestured dismissively toward the human territories visible on the tactical display. What more do we need to know? Before Thex 7 could respond, alarms began shrieking throughout the flagship. Red warning lights bathed the observation deck in hellish illumination as emergency broadcasts echoed through the corridors. All stations, multiple hostile contacts detected in Sector 7. Repeat, hostile contacts in Sector 7. This is not a drill. General Mox 3 stared at the alert indicators in confusion. Sector 7? That is our primary supply depot. It is 300 light-years behind our front lines. Communications Officer Vel 8 burst onto the observation deck, her scaled hide glistening with stress perspiration. General? Sir, we are receiving emergency transmissions from Depot Station Gamma. Display them immediately. The holographic projector activated, showing the command center of what had been the Council's largest military supply facility. Smoke filled the air. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and the station commander's face was streaked with what looked suspiciously like fear. This is Commander Yex-4 at Depot Station Gamma. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack by unknown vessels. Unknown vessels? Mox 3 snarled. There are no hostile forces in that sector. Sir, the station commander continued, his voice cracking with panic. They came out of nowhere. No sensor contacts, no energy signatures, nothing on our scopes until they opened fire. The transmission shook violently as explosions rocked the station. Through the chaos, Tech-7 could see glimpses of the attacking force through the command center's viewports. Sleek, predatory ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Ships that moved with impossible grace and struck with devastating precision. Human ships. How many vessels? General Mox 3 demanded. Unknown, sir. They are using some kind of stealth technology we cannot penetrate. Our sensors show empty space, but our hull is being torn apart by weapons fire. Another massive explosion shook the station. When the smoke cleared, Commander Yex-4 was gone, replaced by twisted metal in the cold vacuum of space. The transmission died. In the sudden silence that followed, the Sex-Fen found himself studying General Mox 3's expression. The arrogance was still there, but cracks were beginning to show. Doubt crept around the edges of his compound eyes. Fear whispered in the nervous twitch of his mandibles. One facility, the general muttered. A surprise attack on a lightly defended supply depot. This proves nothing. Officer Velate cleared her throat nervously. Sir, that was not the only transmission. We are receiving similar reports from 17 other installations. The observation deck fell silent except for the constant hum of the ship's engines and the distant wail of emergency klaxons. 17. Tech-7 whispered. Yes, sir. Fuel depots, communication relays, sensor stations, maintenance facilities. All reporting simultaneous attacks by undetectable vessels. All going dark within minutes of first contact. General Mox 3 stared at the tactical display, watching red markers appear across the map as installation after installation went offline. Impossible. No force could coordinate attacks across such distances. The logistics alone, unless, Tech-7 interrupted quietly. They had been planning this for decades. Unless every attack was pre-positioned and synchronized. Unless they knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. The general whirled to face him. You think the humans did this? With what fleet? Our intelligence shows they have barely 200 ships. Our intelligence, Tech-7 replied with growing certainty, has been carefully manipulated for 50 years. Admiral Kane was not boasting when he said we detected only what they wanted us to detect. Before anyone could respond, the tactical display updated with new information that made Tech-7's blood turn to ice. The attacks were not random strikes against isolated targets. They formed a pattern, a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to achieve a specific strategic objective. The humans were cutting the Council's supply lines, every fuel depot that fed the Outer Rim fleets, every communication relay that coordinated deep space operations, every maintenance facility that kept the far-flung Council military machine operational. All of them, burning in the void. They are not trying to defeat us in battle, X7 realized aloud. They are trying to starve us. Officer Velate's tentacles danced over her communication console as new reports flooded in. Sir, Fleet Admiral Kex-2 is requesting immediate orders. His forces in the Outer Rim are reporting fuel shortages and communication blackouts. How is that possible? Mox 3 demanded. The attacks began less than an hour ago, sir. According to Admiral Kex-2, the attacks may have been ongoing for weeks. The humans appear to have been systematically targeting our logistics network while maintaining the appearance that all installations were still operational. Tech-7 felt a chill of professional admiration mixed with existential terror. They spoofed our communications, made us believe our facilities were still reporting when they had already been destroyed. We have been seeing ghost signals from dead stations. The implications hit the observation deck like a physical blow. If the humans had been conducting covert operations for weeks or even months, if they had been systematically dismantling Council infrastructure while remaining undetected, then every assumption about their capabilities was wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Sir. Officer Velate's voice cracked with strain. Priority transmission from Chancellor Quetha 9. The hologram flickered to life, revealing the Council chamber in a state of barely controlled chaos. The Chancellor stood at the center of the maelstrom, his chitinous armor gleaming with stress secretions. Behind him, Council members argued frantically, while military advisors whispered urgent reports. General Mach 3. The Chancellor's voice cut through the noise like a plasma cutter. Report your status immediately. Sir, we are encountering unexpected resistance. Human forces appear to be more capable than our intelligence indicated. I am aware of that. The Chancellor's compound eyes blazed with fury. I am also aware that our outer rim infrastructure is being systematically destroyed by an enemy we supposedly outnumber 50 to 1. General Mach 3 straightened, his confidence returning slightly. Sir, regardless of their initial success, the humans cannot match our main battle fleets. The Third Imperial Fleet alone possesses more firepower than their entire military. Then use it. Proceed to human space and end this rebellion before it spreads to other species. Sir, Thex 7 interjected, stepping forward. I respectfully suggest caution. The human actions indicate a level of strategic planning that suggests diplomat. The Chancellor's voice carried lethal warning. Your diplomatic assessment has proven spectacularly inadequate. Military solutions are now required. The transmission ended, leaving the observation deck in tense silence. Thex 7 watched the Third Fleet begin its jump to hyperspace, 800 of the most powerful warships ever constructed, heading toward what their crews believed would be an easy victory over primitive opponents. He suspected they were sailing toward their own destruction. Sir, Officer Velate interrupted his dark thoughts. Incoming transmission from the human fleet. General Mach 3 straightened hopefully. Perhaps they wish to surrender before we reach their territory. The hologram activated, once again showing Admiral Kane on the bridge of his flagship. But something had changed in the human's demeanor. The diplomatic mask was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. This was no longer a negotiator trying to avoid war. This was a predator who had tasted blood. Greetings, General Mach 3, Kane began, his voice carrying across the void with casual confidence. I trust you have received our opening messages. You mean your cowardly attacks on civilian installations? Mach 3 snarled. Kane's eyebrows rose slightly. Civilian. I was not aware that fuel depots servicing military fleets, communication relays coordinating warship movements, and maintenance facilities repairing battlecruisers qualified as civilian targets. Perhaps Council definitions differ from standard military doctrine. You have violated every principle of civilized warfare. The human admiral laughed, a sound that sent chills down Thex 7's spine. Civilized warfare. What a remarkable concept. Tell me, General, when your forces bombarded the Altair colonies into submission, was that civilized? When you used biological weapons against the Centauri rebels, was that following proper protocol? When you executed prisoner populations on Vega Prime, were you demonstrating galactic military ethics? Mach 3's mandibles clicked angrily. Those were legitimate military actions against hostile forces. And these, Kane gestured off-screen presumably toward displays showing the burning Council installations, are legitimate military actions against hostile forces. The difference, General, is that we are considerably better at it than you are. The Admiral stepped closer to the transmission pickup, his blue eyes seeming to bore directly into Mach 3's compound ones. You see, General, you made a critical error in your understanding of human nature. You assumed we would fight like other species you have conquered. You expected us to mass our fleets, meet you in honorable battle, and die gloriously for the entertainment of Council historians. Kane's smile was sharp enough to cut starship hull plating. We are not interested in dying gloriously. We are interested in winning decisively. The transmission shifted to show a tactical overview that made Thex 7's breath catch in his throat. The display showed not just the attacks on Council installations but the positioning of human forces throughout the galaxy, not massed fleets waiting for battle, but hundreds of small units positioned for maximum strategic impact. While you were preparing for conventional warfare, we were preparing for something far more effective. You cannot fight what you cannot find. You cannot defeat what you cannot catch. You cannot supply forces that have no supply lines to protect them. General Mach 3 leaned forward aggressively. Your tricks will not save you when the Third Fleet arrives in your territory. We will crush your pathetic defenses and reduce your worlds to ash. The Third Fleet. Kane seemed to consider this. 800 vessels. Quite impressive. I am curious, General. How do you plan to fight a war without fuel? How do you intend to coordinate fleet movements without communications? How do you expect to maintain your ships without access to repair facilities? For the first time since the conversation began, uncertainty flickered in Mach 3's compound eyes. Our ships carry sufficient supplies for extended operations. Extended operations, yes, but not indefinite ones. And certainly not the kind of extended campaign required to occupy and pacify 12-star systems defended by an enemy who refuses to stand still and be destroyed. Kane gestured again, and the tactical display updated to show the current status of Council logistics networks. The picture was grim. Red zones marked areas where supply lines had been severed. Yellow zones indicated regions with reduced operational capacity. Green zones, representing fully functional infrastructure, had shrunk to barely 20% of their original coverage. We have been watching your supply networks for decades, General. We know which installations are critical, which ones are redundant, and which ones you cannot operate without. More importantly, we know how long your fleets can function once those supplies are cut off. The Admiral's expression became almost sympathetic. Your third fleet has enough fuel for approximately 6 weeks of combat operations. After that, they will be forced to return to base for resupply. Unfortunately, most of those bases no longer exist. SCI-FI watched the display with growing horror, seeing the true scope of the human strategy unfold before him. This was not a desperate defensive action by an overmatched enemy. This was a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to cripple Council military capabilities without engaging in direct confrontation. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. It was terrifyingly effective. You have a choice, General, Kane continued. Order the Third Fleet to return to Council space and attempt to restore your supply lines. Or proceed with your attack and watch your ships run out of fuel in enemy territory, leaving them helpless and stranded. We will destroy your fleets before our supplies run low, Mach 3 declared, but his voice lacked conviction. Kane's smile widened. Will you? Are you certain you can find our fleets? Are you confident you can bring us to battle on your terms? Are you prepared for the kind of warfare we have been planning for half a century? The transmission began to fade, but Kane's final words carried clearly through the static. 6 weeks, General. Then your mighty Third Fleet becomes an expensive collection of drifting scrap metal. I suggest you use that time wisely. The hologram disappeared, leaving the observation deck in stunned silence. Around them, the Third Fleet continued its jump toward human territory. 800 ships carrying over 2 million crew members toward what was rapidly becoming apparent as a carefully prepared trap. The SCI-FI stared at the tactical display, watching the red zones spread across the map like a malignant infection. The humans had not been lying about their capabilities. If anything, they had been understating them. Sir, Officer Velate whispered. What are your orders? General Mach 3 stood frozen, his compound eyes fixed on the display showing his fleet's projected fuel consumption rates. For the first time in his military career, he was facing an enemy that refused to play by established rules, an enemy that struck from shadows and disappeared before retaliation was possible, an enemy that fought with patience, precision, and absolutely no regard for concepts like honor or fair play, an enemy that was winning. Sir? Officer Velate repeated more urgently. But General Mach 3 remained silent, staring at the tactical display and finally beginning to understand what Admiral Kane had been trying to tell them from the beginning. The humans had not come to the peace negotiations hoping for a diplomatic solution. They had come to deliver a declaration of war disguised as a final ultimatum. Everything that followed was simply the opening moves of a campaign they had been planning since first contact. A campaign designed to destroy the Galactic Council completely. And as the SCI-FI watched the red zones continue to spread across the tactical display, he realized with cold certainty that it was working. 4 weeks. The Third Imperial Fleet had been in human space for 4 weeks, chasing shadows and burning fuel while fighting an enemy that refused to die properly. Ambassador SCI-FI stood in what remained of the fleet's command center, watching General Mach 3 stare at casualty reports that defied every principle of military logic he had ever learned. The general's once pristine armor was scarred and dented, his compound eyes dulled with exhaustion and something far worse, the growing realization of complete tactical failure. Report, Mach 3 commanded, his voice hoarse from issuing orders that accomplished nothing. Fleet Captain Jex 5 approached hesitantly, clutching a datapad like it might explode. "Sir, we have lost another 17 vessels in the past rotation. No confirmed enemy kills. Fuel reserves are at 38% fleet-wide." "How?" the question emerged as a whisper of defeat. "How do we lose 17 warships to an enemy we cannot even see?" The Thex 7 could have answered that question. He had been watching the human strategy unfold with a mixture of professional admiration and existential terror for 4 weeks. The humans did not fight battles. They executed engineering problems. Every engagement followed the same pattern. Council ships would detect what appeared to be a human fleet, move to intercept and find themselves attacking empty space, while invisible attackers systematically dismantled their formations. By the time Council sensors adapted to detect the human vessels, they would be gone, leaving behind burning wreckage and impossible questions. "Sir," Captain Jex 5 continued reluctantly, "Admiral Kane is requesting communication." General Mox 3's mandibles clicked with what might have been relief. Perhaps the human was finally ready to discuss surrender terms. The holographic display activated, showing Kane's bridge. But the human admiral was no longer alone. Behind him stood other humans in military uniforms, their faces bearing the calm satisfaction of professionals who had executed a complex plan to perfection. "General Mox 3, Kane began cordially, "I trust your tour of human space has been educational." "Educational?" Mox 3 snarled, his dignity finally cracking completely. "You call this butchery educational?" Kane's expression remained pleasant. "I call it efficient. You came here with 800 ships intending to subjugate our species. You now have fewer than 600 operational vessels, rapidly depleting fuel supplies, and no clear path to victory. I would say the lesson has been quite thorough. This is not warfare. This is cowardice." The human admiral tilted his head slightly. "Cowardice? General, we are outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy with vastly superior technology. If we fought you honorably on equal terms using conventional tactics, we would lose decisively, completely." Kane stepped closer to the pickup, his blue eyes bright with cold amusement. "So instead, we fought you intelligently. We used stealth, mobility, superior planning, and your own arrogance against you. We turned your strengths into weaknesses and exploited every tactical disadvantage you brought to our territory. You hide in the shadows like vermin. We use the shadows like weapons," Kane corrected. "There is a difference, one that you are finally beginning to appreciate." Behind the admiral, one of the other humans stepped forward. A woman with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "General Mox 3, I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Walsh, commanding the Human Defense Force. Perhaps it would be helpful if I explained exactly what has been happening to your fleet." The display shifted to show a tactical overview of the past 4 weeks. Red markers indicated Council ship losses, blue markers showed human force positions, and yellow lines traced the movement patterns of both fleets. "You entered our territory expecting to face massed defensive fleets protecting static installations. Instead, you found empty space and ghost signals. You adapted by spreading your forces to cover more territory. We adapted by concentrating our attacks on your dispersed formations." Admiral Walsh's voice carried the clinical precision of a surgeon describing an operation. "You then consolidated your fleet to prevent further losses. We adapted by attacking your supply convoys and support vessels. You established defensive perimeters around strategic targets. We adapted by attacking targets you had not considered strategic." Epic 7 watched the tactical display with growing fascination. The pattern was clear now, visible in the movement of ships and the timing of engagements. Every Council tactical decision had been anticipated and countered before it was even implemented. "You see, General," Admiral Walsh continued, "you have been fighting a war against an enemy that has studied you for 50 years. We know how you think, how you plan, how you react to various tactical situations. More importantly, we know how to make you react in ways that serve our strategic objectives." Kane resumed speaking, his casual tone making the words even more devastating. "Every engagement has been on our terms, at times of our choosing, using weapons and tactics specifically designed to exploit Council weaknesses. You came here to fight a war. We came here to solve a problem." "The problem," Admiral Walsh added, being how to convince a vastly superior enemy force to leave our territory without actually defeating them in conventional battle. General Mox 3 stared at the tactical display, his compound eyes tracing the red markers that represented hundreds of destroyed ships and thousands of dead crew members. You orchestrated all of this? Every engagement, Kane confirmed. Every ambush, every feint, every tactical withdrawal was planned and coordinated months in advance. We knew you would come, we knew how you would deploy, and we knew how you would react to various stimuli. The human admiral gestured to someone off-screen, and the display updated to show current fuel levels for every ship in the Council fleet. The numbers were devastating. Most vessels were below 40% capacity, with some formations approaching critical levels. Which brings us to your current situation, Kane continued. You have 2 weeks of fuel remaining for combat operations. After that, you will be forced to choose between returning to Council space or becoming permanent residents of human territory. You think fuel shortage will force our surrender? Mox 3 demanded. We will fight until our last ship is destroyed. Kane's smile became genuinely sympathetic. General, I have no doubt of your courage or the courage of your crews. But courage does not generate antimatter, and bravery does not repair damaged hyperdrive systems. Your ships need fuel and maintenance. We have ensured that both are unavailable in this region of space. Admiral Walsh stepped forward again. However, we are prepared to offer terms for your withdrawal. The words hit the command center like a physical blow. Terms. Not surrender, but withdrawal. The humans were offering to let the mighty Third Imperial Fleet leave their territory. What terms? X7 found himself asking before General Mox 3 could respond. Kane nodded toward the ambassador with what appeared to be genuine respect. Ambassador X7, I was hoping you would ask that question. The tactical display changed, showing not battle formations but political boundaries. Human space, marked in blue, had expanded significantly from the 12 systems the Council had been willing to grant them. We claim sovereignty over 47 star systems, including all worlds currently inhabited by human populations, and all systems necessary for our long-term security and expansion. General Mox 3's voice cracked with outrage. 47 systems? You demanded 12 during negotiations? We demanded 12 during peace negotiations, Kane corrected. These are the terms for ending a war you chose to begin. The price has increased considerably. Admiral Walsh continued the presentation. All Council military forces will withdraw from human space immediately. No Council vessels will enter human territory without express permission from human authorities. All trade and diplomatic contact will be conducted through designated border stations under human administration. And in return? X7 asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. In return, Kane replied, we will cease our campaign against Council infrastructure. Your surviving supply depots will remain operational. Your communication networks will function normally. Your fleets will have fuel and supplies necessary to return to Council space. The hologram shifted to show the current state of Council logistics throughout the Outer Rim. The damage was extensive but not irreparable. Critical systems remained functional. Skeleton networks still operated. Emergency supplies could be distributed. It would take years to rebuild what had been destroyed, but civilization could continue. However, Kane's voice carried quiet finality. If Council forces remain in human space beyond the next 48 hours, we will resume our campaign. This time we will target core Council systems. The implications hit the command center like antimatter detonation. Core systems. Not the Outer Rim installations that serviced frontier fleets, but the industrial heartlands that powered galactic civilization itself. Admiral Walsh provided clarification that made X7's blood turn to ice. We have identified 17 critical manufacturing centers, 34 primary communication hubs, and 56 major transportation nexuses in core Council space. All are currently targeted by pre-positioned human forces. Impossible, General Mox 3 snarled. Core systems are protected by defensive fleets. Sensor networks monitor every approach vector. Kane's smile returned. General, if we can infiltrate and destroy Outer Rim installations that your military considered secure, what makes you think core systems are beyond our reach? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. If the humans could strike at the industrial heart of Council civilization, if they could paralyze the manufacturing and communication networks that held the galactic community together, then this war would become something far worse than military defeat. It would become civilizational collapse. "You are bluffing," Mox 3 declared. But his voice lacked conviction. In response, Kane nodded to someone off-screen. The holographic display shifted to show live footage from what appeared to be the primary manufacturing center of Altair Prime. The camera view was from inside the facility, showing massive industrial machinery and thousands of workers going about their duties. Workers who had no idea they were being observed by human agents. "This is real-time surveillance from Manufacturing Complex 7 on Altair Prime," Kane explained conversationally. "Would you like us to demonstrate our access to other facilities?" General Mox 3 stared at the display in horror, finally understanding the true scope of human infiltration. They had not simply built a secret fleet or developed new weapons. They had spent 50 years placing agents throughout Council space, mapping infrastructure, identifying vulnerabilities, and preparing for total war. "How?" The word emerged as barely a whisper. "Trade delegations," Admiral Walsh explained. "Cultural exchanges, scientific conferences, diplomatic missions. For 50 years, humans have been visiting Council worlds with legitimate purposes and secondary objectives. We learned your languages, studied your technology, mapped your installations, and recruited local assets." Kane stepped closer to the pickup, his expression becoming almost gentle. "General, you keep asking how we accomplished this as if it required some impossible feat of engineering or supernatural ability. The truth is far simpler. We succeeded because you never considered us a serious threat." The human admiral gestured toward the tactical display showing the battered Third Fleet. "Even now, facing the destruction of your expeditionary force, you struggle to accept that a species you considered primitive could outmaneuver the galactic community's finest military minds. Your arrogance was our greatest weapon," Admiral Walsh added. "Every assumption about human limitations, every dismissive assessment of our capabilities, every confident prediction of easy victory gave us opportunities to prepare for this moment." Kane resumed speaking, his voice carrying the weight of final judgment. "The Galactic Council offered humanity a choice between slavery and extinction. We have provided a third option: coexistence on our terms." General Mox 3 straightened, his military bearing returning despite the circumstances. "And if the Council rejects your terms," the human admiral's expression became cold as interstellar space, "then there will be no Council to reject anything. We will systematically dismantle every installation, destroy every fleet, and reduce every core world to pre-industrial conditions. Galactic civilization will collapse, and from its ruins humanity will build something better." The words were delivered with such calm certainty that Sec 7 felt his heart skip several beats. This was not bravado or negotiating bluster. This was a species that had planned for total war and possessed the means to execute it. "You would destroy billions of innocent lives?" Sec 7 asked quietly. Kane turned toward him, and for a moment the diplomatic mask slipped completely. Behind the human's blue eyes, Sec 7 saw something that made him understand why every species in the galaxy had eventually submitted to Council authority. Humans were not like other species. They did not surrender. They did not compromise. They did not accept limitations imposed by others. Ambassador Kane replied softly, "Your Council offered to exterminate our species if we refused to accept slavery. Do not lecture us about the value of innocent life when your civilization is built on the graves of those who dared to resist your authority." The Admiral straightened, and the diplomatic mask returned. "However, we prefer not to destroy galactic civilization if alternatives exist. Hence our generous terms." General Mox 3 croaked. "Extraordinarily generous," Kane confirmed. "We could have simply destroyed your fleet and proceeded with our campaign against Council infrastructure. Instead, we are offering you the opportunity to withdraw with most of your forces intact. We are providing you with the chance to return to Council space and rebuild your logistics networks." Admiral Walsh stepped forward. "More importantly, we are offering the Council a chance to learn from this experience, to understand that humanity is not a species that can be conquered, controlled, or contained. We are a species that must be treated as equals or eliminated entirely. Kane nodded agreement. And elimination, as you have discovered, is considerably more difficult than your intelligence assessment suggested. The transmission began to fade, but Kane's final words carried clearly through the static. 48 hours, General. After that, the terms changed permanently. The hologram disappeared, leaving the command center in deathly silence. Around SCI-7, Council officers stood frozen, staring at displays that showed their fleet's desperate fuel situation and the impossible tactical position they now occupied. General Mach 3 slowly sank into his command chair, the weight of absolute defeat settling on his shoulders like a burial shroud. "Signal the fleet," he whispered. "Prepare for withdrawal to Council space." "Sir?" Captain Jex 5 asked uncertainly. "We are leaving," Mach 3 declared with the hollow voice of a broken commander. "Signal all vessels. We are leaving human space immediately." As orders flew around the command center and the mighty Third Imperial Fleet began its humiliating retreat, SCI-7 found himself staring at the tactical display showing human territorial claims. 47 star systems, a region of space larger than most Council member civilizations controlled. The humans had not simply won a war. They had forced the galactic community to recognize them as a major power. They had transformed themselves from a minor irritant into an equal partner through the simple expedient of demonstrating that the alternatives were unacceptable. It was, SCI-7 reflected, a masterpiece of strategic planning and tactical execution, the kind of campaign that would be studied in military academies for centuries, assuming galactic civilizations survived long enough to have military academies. Because one thing had become absolutely clear during this brief, devastating conflict: humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they had arrived as predators, not prey. The age of easy Council dominance was over. The age of human influence had begun, and somewhere in the depths of space, Admiral Kane was probably smiling as he watched the Third Imperial Fleet limp home with its tail between its legs, carrying news that would change everything. The humans had withdrawn from peace talks. They had chosen war instead, and they had won. Decisively, completely, permanently. The Galactic Council would never make the mistake of underestimating humanity again, because now they understood the truth that Admiral Kane had been trying to tell them from the beginning. Humans did not negotiate from positions of weakness. They simply eliminated the source of their weakness and negotiated from strength, even if creating that strength required burning half the galaxy to ash. It was, SCI-7 realized as he watched the fleet retreat, exactly the kind of lesson that civilized species needed to learn about their newest neighbors. The hard way.